and bring on some more dispatchers and offset the cost of what the impacts are. And that's part of the other challenge with us, is that it's hard to get dispatchers. And if we needed to grow dispatch and dispatchers, it would be even harder to get even more.
I think we're getting bogged down in a lot of discussion of details, and we're never going to be able to get through the determination of goals. If we can't go through each area and discuss pros and cons, or we're going to be here all night. So let's go on to the next. If there are no additional areas to be added, let's go on to the next goal, which is maintain sound fiscal health and low taxes without overrides. Identify strategies to balance the budget within the constraints of inflation plus growth, or 2.5% or less. And I think there are specific actions identified at this point. Are there other actions that should be considered in this area? Okay. Hearing none, let's go on to item 6, clean water. Develop a clean water strategy and implementation plan following previously discussed plan to avoid additional property tax burden to residential taxpayers. And talks about the stormwater management plan, the water division study, Parkers River Bridge, and the clean community partnership to advance clean water, which is, I assume, wastewater?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if I could just chime in, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the D, I'd like to suggest that maybe what we do is we add a little bit more meat to that. We know we need to stand up the Water Resources Advisory Committee shortly, right? And get that going. We also need to identify legislation. We talked about, we have a town meeting article. We have to get going on introducing legislation, so I would put a bullet there. And there may be some value. Dennis is really looking at their cost recovery plan and taking another look at how to finance. Maybe that's something that we need to consider as at least a discussion item here. So those are sort of 3 or 4 deliverables that are probably worth mentioning and noting. So I'll just put that out there for item number D. And the other thing is on the water division study. I'm glad to see this. I was very pleased with the presentation at the last meeting. There's a lot of work that has to be done. I think based on what we discussed at the last Selectmen's meeting, I would perhaps put something in here. We had talked about some kind of oversight group or some kind of committee. I think we need to sort of, there seemed to be consensus on that at the last meeting, so I would put that on there as another deliverable, is stand up a committee to oversee this work and advise the board, something along those lines. So I think these are all good items, and those are just some things that I would add in terms of deliverables.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Let's move on. I think those are good suggestions.
Should that word on D be invest instead of invent?
Yeah.
Is a typo there?
Good catch.
Invest. Thank you, Mike. Number 7, continue to provide exceptional customer service while looking for new opportunities to promote and expand dialogue with residents. And it talks about specific actions within improving customer service and increasing ways to share information. I think we've had some discussions about difficulties in using our website and so forth, and then this also talks about increasing online services. So are there other specifics we should be talking about?
Well, I mean, I keep screaming about the website, and I'm glad to see it here. I would just have it stand out more as a priority, particularly accessibility, usability, being able to find things without too many complications. I would add a couple of other things. This is from what I understand, the cable contract with Comcast, the window to renegotiate begins this summer. So I think we, as a board, are going to need to revisit the charge of the Cable Advisory Committee and how we are going to deal with renegotiating with that Comcast agreement. That window begins in August, so I think we need to have at least a plan on how we're going to engage that. So I would put that on the list. I mean, we get 600,000 plus every year from them. We may be in line to get more, so I would have that in there. And then I also think that we need to look at ways to take full advantage of other forms of communication, particularly not just the website, but also the media, the TV station. We have a government station. You know, we need to look at other towns are investing, quite frankly. They're using their Comcast dollars and setting aside dollars to invest in the programming for those stations. Other towns have spent anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000. I'm not recommending that we do that, but I think we need to look at what our options are for improving the programming on the government channel. I'm a little bit concerned that as we do stuff, whether it's visioning or we do work on clean water, that we need to be able to bring the community along with what we're doing. Not everybody can show up at public meetings or public forums or selectmen's meetings, but the more ways we can make available information to the residents, the voters, the taxpayers, the better off I think we all are, and they are. So I think the more we can get out of that TV channel and our website, I think in the long run it helps us immensely in terms of helping educate voters in terms of all the work that's going on here. So
Does that revenue go in our general fund now?
It goes in the general fund, and it's been used to prop up the IT department, which is
Okay.
common. I mean, one of the things that came out of a meeting we had with the cable TV folks was that our educational programming, too, was pretty weak from the
Yep.
TY controls that as well. It's one of those issues where X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars are being used in a capacity that doesn't really support TV programming. So it's kind of a tightrope to do what was just mentioned, which I'm in support of. It's just how do you get there from here type of
Right.
idea. We do believe with the flood and the insurance settlement, we have an opportunity to potentially begin that migration over to get off so much hardware in the building. But that analysis is underway now to see if what that might look like to do that.
Well, I think the other thing is, certainly if we're able, I don't know if we'll be able to renegotiate our agreement with Comcast, but, maybe the committee that looks into that could think about designating the funds or setting the funds aside specifically for purposes that are related to public communication as opposed to.
Well, if I can comment on that,
with the
Mr.
general
Chairman,
fund.
it's the expectation is that we're using those funds for programming. The
Right.
question is who's doing it.
Right.
We had sort of pledged, or our thinking was that we could do that internally, but I don't believe it's happened the way maybe originally thought. The other thing is we are leaving money on the table. Other towns are getting more money than we are under the agreement, so we may want to look at how we can increase. I hate the idea of leaving money on the table, but it's been suggested to us that we try to get the full amount.
Maybe Verizon would contribute more.
And the franchise fee has a little bit of wiggle room on it, but
There you go.
Yep. Okay. All right. Number 8 is develop a clear strategy to address opioid addiction and substance abuse. And it includes focus areas, create a town-wide team. I thought we already had that.
we do. I think part of it is developing a more robust, what I talk about is like this intermediate level of treatment. I don't want to use the word treatment necessarily, but intermediate level of follow-up that we have been unable to do. So for
Okay.
those folks that want to come out of that woodwork, the support groups are in place. We now have 2 grant positions to assist with this in the police department effort. So now it's a matter of stringing everybody together and all these efforts together into one comprehensive strategy. And what does it look like to measure that? What is it that we want to measure off of that? And that's part of the challenge moving forward. How do we know we're having success there?
Okay. I'd seen some programming just in the last week or two, there was, and I wish I could remember the community in the western part of the state that was having some measurable success.
There's been some success stories, yeah.
So I think that, being able to follow some of those examples would be great if they continue to be successful. I know, Eric, this has been an area that you expressed some frustration. I don't know if you have any other things that we should be focusing on.
I was almost at the point where I felt like it shouldn't even be on our goals, because I said during candidates night, it is so much larger than us.
It is.
And at the end of the day, I think the police department does a tremendous job in doing what they are able to do. But, they're a small piece in the big wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And, as much as they do, a lot of their efforts get undone at higher levels.
Right.
So it's just frustrating to feel like, whether or not we achieve all of these goals, at least most of them are achievable.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not within a year,
Right.
maybe some of them. I just feel like this one is, I don't feel it's achievable. It's nice to have on there.
Yeah. I think it's very difficult, but I do think that, for example, having the committee focus or work with the schools to make sure that there's a level of education effort going on that, is appropriate for that area. I think that's one thing that has, in the past, been very successful with tobacco. And, it remains to be seen whether those kinds of programs are successful with opioids.
So there are two schools of thought when putting education into schools, and I won't tell you which one is the school of thought that our school system subscribes to. But one school of thought says that to educate children will help prevent them from using these things. The other school of thought says to educate the children brings attention to the fact that maybe it's a problem and therefore kids won't want to come to our schools.
That's why you don't have the dogs go in there anymore.
What?
That's why the dogs don't go in anymore.
We don't want to create the perception that there is a drug problem in our schools for fear of scaring school choice kids away,
No.
I think.
I think that the towns should come to an agreement with the media that they all do it, and it's off. It's all, whatever the findings are, not that you're trying to censor anything, but it's very important that these things happen. But yet, because it's front page news what they find, I think that a lot of them are hesitant to do it, and it's very unfortunate, because we're never going to get drugs out of the schools unless we continue to do that. It's rampant, and it's not just DUI, it's every school. But every school now has the fear of having the dogs. It's very rare that they go anymore, because they're afraid of what's going to be on the front page of the newspaper. And I wish that our districts, our chiefs, our superintendents would work with the media to say, listen, that, we want to do this, and we want to just have it done. You don't need to have all the findings in the front page of the newspaper. It's,
Well, I think our committee can take a leadership role with that. That's not an easy task. That's, yeah. All right. Number 10, improve energy quality and security for town residents by investigating alternative sustainable energy opportunities and work toward reducing energy consumption town-wide. And there's bullet points regarding Cape Cod Energy Park, solar installations, and energy conservation. Any areas where we should be adding or changing focus there?
Well, just in reviewing this for me, Mr. Chairman, I wonder where in all of this we stick Vineyard Wind, because it is going to occupy some of our time. I'm not sure that's the place to put it, but it is an issue.
is it a goal?
No. No, I don't think, some of these things aren't goals, they're sort of tasks, but, in setting goals, I think we want to make sure that if you were to set a goal, I think we want to be responsive to the community and make sure that the concerns that they have raised and the concerns that our own staff have raised certainly get addressed. I see we've made a very specific reference to to golf and programming. I'm just not sure where it fits, but it's certainly something that I think many of us are very concerned about. Maybe it doesn't fit anywhere in here. I'm just flagging it before we wrap this up.
I suppose it depends on your viewpoint.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
Trust me, we haven't forgotten about it. It's one of those
No, I
things
know.
that's taken up a lot of bandwidth.
No, it's the category of energy. I think what we want is to make sure that whatever's done, it's done in a way that doesn't harm or compromise, the resources and interests of the town.
You talk about Vineyard Wind?
Yeah.
Okay, I had made some notes. I thought actually, and I hate to go back, I had considered that,
Where would you put that?
perhaps as in there, goal number 2, where we're talking about infrastructure.
You'd slap it in there?
Yeah, I would put the.
So you would note it somewhere so that at least we're flagging
I'd
it for
put
people.
Vineyard Wind in, informational meetings, reviewing the mitigation options, reviewing impact. I think those are things that need to be highlighted. It's not saying we're going to do something one way or the other. It's just saying, we've got to review those and have some public disclosure and public discussion, so.
I mean, one of the things that we have been doing is dedicating a website so that residents can have access to critical information about the project. I think that's certainly a service, and I think it's very helpful. The darn thing is so confusing. There's so much paper flying around. It's tough to keep on top of any of this stuff. So to the extent to which the town is, and it involves town resources, at least to keep abreast of what's going on, I do think that provides a public service to people without endorsing anything.
Okay,
I certainly support continuing to do that.
all right. I'm going to ask to step back for a second on item, go back to 7. I had a note about developing a closer relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, and Tracy, you had really brought that up as part of our work. I think that certainly that should be in, I'm not sure that goal number 7 is the right place for it, but we need to have an area of focus.
I think that might make more sense in number 1, maybe?
In number 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We did ask the chamber to come up with a few areas of focus point that they wanted to initially engage the board on, so they're giving that some thought.
Okay, all right, I think that's good. Okay, number 11, continue to preserve open space for conservation and passive recreation, equitably balance the expansion of open space. And the subcategories here are land management and Yankee Village specifically. Comments, questions on this particular area?
So didn't we do a land inventory 3 or 4 years ago when we were talking about pilots? We had developed an inventory of all town-owned land.
I thought it was also done, Eric, when they built the police station. I think Mike Almonte was the guy who spearheaded that on behalf of the police. And the reason I remember that is at the time, Recreation was interested in potentially developing a rec center. And I know that I did see a list of an inventory of town-owned properties at that time.
So
I know it's been done at least a couple of times.
Ed Centio and Karen Green, do you want to speak to that, Karen? Have been working?
Unless you'd like.
No, I think you guys are the ones actively engaged in tracking that information down.
Yeah, so we're building on the pieces of information that we already have with an eye towards which properties are we maintaining, what are the costs associated with that maintenance, what levels of maintenance are we able to provide. So we're starting with a set of information that came largely from the Open Space and Recreation Plan, adding on to that information from the Finance Department that was part of all the tax takings and whatnot. So a couple goals are to identify which pieces are we actively using. Are there any pieces that we're not using that we might want to dispose of in terms of raising some revenue somehow? And then the other piece is just this maintenance piece and what is it costing? Are there any efficiencies to be had?
So the goal is to get in front of you a document that, that you could scroll through. This shows the asset that we have. If it's got structures on it, here's what they are, the cost to maintain it. But where this reinvigorated itself was in town meeting 2017. You recall that there was a number of parcels that finance had identified that we were looking to either sell or lease. And there's a few really choice parcels, there's no question, that we believe that internally that there could be some value. The question that I think was answered pretty robustly at town meeting was the public process to bring those parcels forward and what that looks like. So what we wanted to be able to do is, kind of focus in on the smaller parcels, get those in front of this process that we'll propose to the board, and then let it go through to find out, is it something that you don't have, we don't have any need for it, we declare it surplus or whatever, and let it see if there's people that want it. We do know there are some parcels out there that aren't of any great note to us personally, but before we can even consider putting those out to the market for them to bid on, we'd want to go through a public process. So we're in the process of doing that policy to present to you very shortly in the future. So it's, like I said, they're like anything else. There's some really nice parcels out there that could have commercial viability or some other viability, and there's some that you'd probably want to hang on to. So, but we know we needed to come up with a better way to get it in front of you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts in this area? All right, the last item that's on the list here is provide robust programming for all residents. Talks about golf. I suppose it could be 3 or 4 pages of bullet points on golf. And then B is expand and enhance community programming. And that's a pretty general description. What did you have in mind there, David?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that Kathy Bailey's been, obviously advocating, and she's had some degree of some success on that, is an age-friendly intergenerational community. So the next iteration of that would be what does that mean for the future here? I mean, obviously there was some spillover of a pickleball future for some of us. I think there's some, when you get into housing, there's some future housing ideas that are out there related to mixed age bracket housing that have a commercial aspect of it. And so there's a lot of different ideas floating around, and I think much like what we discussed to start this goal session on with this visioning, I think we need to spend some time with Kathy's group to identify, what does Yarmouth look like in 10 or 20 years from now? And are we on course and laser focused to provide the things we need to provide as a town to be ready for that? I do know there's no shortage of needs for folks. I know there's one of the things that does periodically pop up in here is problem properties, and when we get into some of those, we know there's a lot of mental health issues on those sites, and there's transportation challenges, there's folks that want to go to work that have tough times. So there's like a lot of things. There's a laundry list, and what we want to make sure is that, A, we understand where the town folks want to go, and we come up with a strategy to go in that direction. So I've asked Kathy to work with her Tufts group and a consultant to come up with some ideas of what other communities that have been successful in that area have been able to do to get a plan that we could consider.
I think that's that general area in terms of quality of life for residents is really important. I think that's the other part of a vigorous community is making sure that we've got things that the residents really want to do, and that we're not so focused on being a quality resort, that we forget about, what's important for our residents. And one of the things that it popped to mind was, that is really not mentioned in this document is library resources. And I have a sense that, Kathy Bailey, in talking about, what's important for the senior community, is probably going to come back at some point and say, we need to have high-quality library resources.
Yep, no question. So we wanted to challenge those divisions, and one of the things by putting them all in the community services, they can work with each other, no boundaries, to come up and problem solve with that. Unfortunately, golf's taken a lot of wind out of us lately, but I think we're moving in a good direction there. But to your point, though, Norm, I had a woman come into the office the other day just to chat, and she, a new retiree, and she didn't know if there was any conservation land in town to be able to walk the trails and whatnot, which was an interesting question, because we have a lot of conservation. So part of the challenge to that is, how do we tell folks today of these great amenities that we have, and what would be an easy way to make them feel comfortable to identify where they are and where to park, and it's really those basic elementary things. And so I've asked Pat to work on an idea of not only there's the traditional thing that we did from another generation, which was put a sign up there, tell people this is what it is. But the reality is today, when people come to town, whether they're retirees or visitors, they're going to use their phone, and we know just from interactions with the website, more and more phones and tablets are what's being used to talk to us. And so we need to get something up here. There's apps available that would put all of our historic sites, for instance, Taylor Bray, the cemeteries and whatnot, all in one location. It could take somebody right to where they want to go, and you could within a short amount of time on your phone put a nice little itinerary together to view the town. So it's those types of ideas and evolving towards the future, because we do see a lot of folks come in that spent some summers here, and now they're full-time retirees, and they're looking for information on what to do. So that's our challenge.
Yeah. There is a very active newcomers group with a very substantial membership, and and I think they do a great job of providing a lot of different alternatives for people for interaction, as well as gaining knowledge of what the town has to offer.
Yep.
So. All right, are there other areas? We've reached the end of the list that I think that Dan and the staff had provided to us. Are there other areas that we should be focusing on?
I do have some comments on number 12, which I think should actually be number 11. I think they're misnumbered. It goes from 8 to 10. If you're going to mention golf, I think you have to mention all amenities, and that's why I think it should be left off. And if it is going to be included, I think that, language like increasing pro shop revenue and expanding membership by 10%, those are directives given by a manager to an employee. Those aren't appropriate for this board. They're much too specific. And back to my point of mentioning golf, golf is one of many amenities that we offer to our residents. We have pickleball, tennis courts, parks. I mean, I don't think it's fair to single out golf because we are trying to build that program. I think that's more of a directive from management to staff, not from Board of Selectmen to a list of goals. I think the enhance and expand community programming is enough unless you're going to list everything.
Yeah, what's everybody else think? I tend to agree with Eric's comment that it's, maybe highlighting that, because Tracy, you had brought up the
Splash pad.
water parks.
Right.
Yeah, splash parks.
Yeah. I mean, there's dog parks and boardwalks, and I mean,
Playgrounds and beaches.
yeah, I think it is indicative of a special interest to single out golf.
You got swimming programs, you've got the summer adventure program at Flax Ponds,
There's a ton of amenities.
and it goes on and on. So it's either, like you
Maybe
said,
the goal should be more to improve and increase quality of life programs and better, find a better way to
you say
inform
like,
the public
Right.
these programs.
There's some general, like recreational and leisure time programs.
Right.
Maybe we need to put together a pamphlet, a booklet,
I think that would be a great idea.
you know, of, I mean,
What-
I know they
what is
have.
there to do?
They have something similar to that, but not, it's not from us. You know, of all the conservation, all the assets that we have.
Right.
Beaches, I know on the website they do it, but playgrounds, beaches.
Yeah, that's why we challenged the group to work together, come up with it, whether it's a paper document, electronic document, to get it all on one page of, here's what we have to offer, as opposed to separate silos of the libraries do this, senior center does that, recs, beaches do that.
Well, I think, the senior services works with Pat now,
Yep.
and
That's correct.
and recreation is all part of her bailiwick, and as is golf, and, so, I think bundling all that together, and as, as Tracy suggested, more of a quality of life focus is probably more appropriate than being specific.
This also talks to Mark's point about communication, how we communicate with our
Yep.
folks today, too, is a ever-increasing challenge, for sure,
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's where I would make a reference, is on the communication side, making an extra effort to find ways to inform people about the various amenities. Golf jumps out at me principally in this context as something that I would note just as one little bullet in the fiscal health area, all right? Because that's really principally what we've been looking at, is how do we turn that around and get it in a much stronger financial footing, right?
Right.
Hasn't that been basically it? So more or less from that point of view.
But strong golf also is good programming, good recreation,
Yeah.
good
it is.
community.
But I think,
Yep.
I think, as Eric was saying, you kind of get into, I mean, that's a different discussion about,
Understood.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Eric's comment is appropriate. We don't want to send the message to Pat in particular that, hey, golf is the number one area that, I'm sure it's taking quite a bit of her time already. And, but I don't think we need to add additional emphasis to that.
No, but I think Eric was making the other point of putting metrics in here. These are things that management should be doing with internally. All I would do under golf would be to put a bullet about getting golf on stronger financial footing and sticking it under the fiscal health area. That's how I would
Yeah,
do
and
it.
that's part of the individual supervisor's professional development, is put these metrics, that level of specific metric on there.
And, we've talked a couple times tonight about getting the Chamber of Commerce involved. I think that is something that if they don't have, I wonder why, and why wouldn't they want to be a part of putting, things to do in Yarmouth, some sort of information. It's something that we could use, something that could be used on their website. Somebody wants to.
I think to Mark's point that it is there, it's just between us and them, there's a lot of information out there, but it just needs to be pulled together.
On the Chamber's website?
There's stuff on the Chamber's
There is, yeah.
website, there's stuff on our website, beach information, there's stuff,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah,
just to
spread
have
around.
one thing.
Yeah.
And, while electronically it's great, we have a lot of people that still, it'd be nice to have it not only electronically in one place, but actually hand where they can go and take it with them. And
I think it was fair to say that the golf and chamber didn't always see eye to eye on the effort, too, so we're working
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's a substantial list. Do we have any other items to add to it at this point? Areas that we haven't touched on? I think, our discussion pointed out that we probably have some areas where we need to have some agenda items.
Yes.
Talking about specifics that are continuing issues. I mean, we've got to come back to the regional agreement and how do we work through that process and make sure that we can energize a change there. I'm trying to think of the other area that we were focused on getting into detail.
Yeah, there'll be some periodically through the course of the year, like stormwater, for instance, there's a presentation coming up this summer on the stormwater permitting. There's some stuff we have to do with part of the new MSW permit for us that your board should be aware of, that for year one milestones out of the next 5 years. So as we hit those, you'll be given periodic updates on that, and they'll be presented to you.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else at this point on the goals, then we'll go on to town administrator items.
Chairman, if I could just ask before we
Yes.
jump in there, it'd be helpful to get guidance from the board on the specificity or level of detail that you would like to see the goals document be printed. It'll take us a few months before we can digitize this and put it in the Invisio application. So we'd like to get the FY19 goals, once they're voted upon or approved by the board, up on the website. And I just want, do you want that full document with the sub-actions included? Or would you like to see just the goals and the focus areas, or just the goals? Just some guidance from the board would be helpful for us before we post that.
I would just say the goals. I don't think we have to put up action items.
I think mission and goals, the points.
I think mission and goals would be
And
it.
I think one of the things that
True.
is important to notate is that they're not in a prioritized order. They're just, because people will see that and they think that, you know what I mean, that if it's number 10, it's not as important to us. They're all important.
You know, keep in mind that our goals used to be 1 or 2 sentences. It was the former town administrator
Yeah.
that developed the process of coming up with key action items and then specifically outlining the efforts that had been done to achieve those key actions. So I think for the purpose of this board to have very,
But years-
broad goals.
Years back, there was pages of goals, then we went from that to this,
Right.
back to
Right.
10, yeah.
Yeah, so I think at this point, Chris, if we can deal with the headings, I think that seems appropriate.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. We can move ahead then
Yeah.
with town administrator.
Sure. There is 2 items on the consent agenda. Chris, you want to discuss those? It's collective
Yeah.
bargaining.
Yeah, 2 items on the consent agenda. There are 2 contract items related to bargaining. One is a wage reopener for the steelworkers. They are in their 2nd year of a 3-year contract. They had a wage reopener provision for FY19. We met with the union and negotiated a 2% cost of living increase for fiscal year 19. That fits within the parameters that were authorized by the board and approved at town meeting. And then the second item is the sanitation union. They've recently affiliated with steelworkers, and so to bring them, what we wanted to do was essentially bring them in line with the other steelworkers contract so that we could negotiate as one unit and potentially collapse those 2 into one next year. So what we did was we negotiated a 1-year contract extension. The only changes, the contract stays the same, the only changes are a 2% COLA for that group for fiscal year 19, and then just changing the header of the contract essentially to recognize that they are now affiliated with the United Steelworkers Association. So those are the 2 items that are on the list.
Okay. We have a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Okay,
Thank you.
that's fine.
Last week, I sent you some updates on Vineyard Wind. We have secured the date of July 17th for them to come in front of the board. So one of the questions that has been asked of me to ask you is the format publicly. Would there be any public participation? Would the board consider some kind of session in which maybe it gets moderated, but folks that have come to see me had wanted to make sure that I shared with you their concerns about having a dialogue that was just between the board and Vineyard Wind. So I said I'll bring it up at the meeting and let the board to decide on that particular topic. And the other issue was, there were I sent in that email, I sent a laundry list of our questions that we have submitted to them. So there's this new 30-day supplemental period. The applicant was given an opportunity to provide a more robust response to their draft environmental impact report. My understanding is that they have now 30 days to respond to that. We have a comment deadline coming up on July 9th, so we'll make some additional comments. And then after that period goes by, the latest supplement, which is like 100-something pages long, there'll be a period of time to comment when they have to answer those. So this is a very long, drawn-out process. And so if you have any specific questions that have not yet been listed, and one of the things that we had told Vineyard Wind the other day is a good starting point is going to be take all those questions that we submitted to you and get ready to answer them when you come in front of the board. But if there's anything else, please send it along to me, and I'll make sure that they know that going into the meeting.
The only other thing is the question of funding the analysis.
Right. And that's something I was with them last week on some commentary, asked them again, and I know the chairman has asked them, and we continue to get no commitment. And I did mention to everybody that, you know, they offered up early on in the process $30 million worth of monies to different things, but no money for Yarmouth or Barnstable for technical assistance or advice. So
That's all I need to know right there.
I did receive the sandwich in lieu of tax payment. I'll send that information to you. So they and I know the chairman has got some information on some other project agreements. So there's a lot of information we're collecting. But certainly, like I said, if you think that there's something we haven't yet covered that they don't know about that we should get to them, let me know.
We had this issue before, and I know Karen's here, and we had this about not being able to take a payment in lieu of. I don't know why it was, but we didn't have the authority because we didn't have, was it the local comprehensive plan?
I'm not
There was
recalling.
we had a project that we were trying to mitigate in the past, and I can't remember what it was. But we weren't able to enter into a side agreement because we didn't have the authority to do that. I'm not sure if this fits under the same category.
The only thing I can think of is, because we don't have, I hate to say it out loud, because we don't have the local comprehensive plan, that the town wasn't able to enter into a party to a development agreement.
would
So I
this
don't know if
be-
that's what you're thinking of.
Would this fall under that same type of category?
I don't think so. My understanding
think
of
so.
sandwich is it had to get town meeting approval. So we'd have to get a document in position in front of town meeting to eventually approve of that extra payment. This isn't related to, because, you know, this is more like a revenue share, I'd call that, more than anything. I think it's important to focus in on these communities that host all these other power plants. Part of the host is continuously participating in the revenue that these things generate, and that's something that we didn't get to talk with them about back in January. But now that there's a project, we should certainly make sure that, A, we can get a value of what the project will generate over X number of years of its license, and then B, what should be our share of that as it relates, just like we
I
saw.
completely agree, and I'm very disappointed that they will respond to any of our questions.
Frustrating.
And that
I'm with you.
particular point.
You know, I've never been in favor of this, and I'm wondering, am I the only one that feels that way? Because I don't know why we're entertaining them. I mean, are the rest of you still up in the air about whether or not you think that you're going to be supportive of them landing in Yarmouth, and that this information is going to provide you with insight so that you will be able to feel good about your decision? Because there's no information that they can give to me that is going to change my mind.
I think one of the things that gives me pause, Eric, to not continue to talk is the advice that we've gotten from legal counsel, that the potential for them to do it without us having any benefit is still there. You know, if they can get a road opening permit and do it without us entering an agreement, I think that we'd be doing a disservice to the taxpayers to not.
Well, okay, so in between, how long is it going to take to get that road opening permit? Because I don't want to sit in 100 hours worth of meetings for the next 2 years only to find out that we're going to get it shoved down our throats.
I think, first of all, listening to what they have to say, as well as opening a dialogue as to, they put some information out initially, made a host agreement offer, and that's what it is, an offer.
So you're interested in entertaining the idea of a sum of money to come into Lewis Bay and through Yarmouth?
Not only with that provision, I'm interested in making sure that there's no environmental damage as well. And I think that protecting that resource is important to me, and I'm sure to the rest of this board. And I think that having the dialogue with them, especially with regard to potential methods of entry that would protect the resources.
Okay.
What they've got proposed right now, and what I'd be afraid that the state might permit, would be an open trenching application of the cable through Lewis Bay, and that process, I think, is significantly different than the drilling alternative. And, so I think that if we don't have that opportunity for dialogue and for public participation in our community, I think we're giving up something. So,
Yeah,
I
I'm
understand your
not opposed to the dialogue.
concerns.
I'm just, and I think you answered the question. I think what you're saying is that if you were satisfied that it was not going to be harmful and there was going to be a financial benefit, that you would entertain it.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am not, so I'm going to sit here through all these meetings, and we're going to have fights and public comments.
I think we will. But you had a specific comment about, a question about what should be the format for July
Yes,
17th?
Great. I mean, we had originally talked about the same kind of format that you had at the drive-in site review, which went, I thought, pretty well. But, considering the nature of the project, there's certainly some very passionate folks out there that want to be heard. It is an opportunity for them to, I sat with some folks today for a couple of hours, and they have a lot of really good questions, and I think there's a way to have some public input in it. I do also know that you had mentioned to me that one of the outcomes of the 17th would be to get the applicant to go out into the neighborhoods and have some more of these dialogues, because they'd been a little bit short there. So it comes to find out, I think one of them scheduled for Monday, July 2nd in Hyannis Park. I'm like, who's going to be around on July 2nd? I mean, so I guess that doesn't quite fit the bill, but, I went to them with all those additional requests, but it's your call. I mean, how you want to go down that.
Public hearing?
No, it's not a hearing. It's like an informational meeting. I mean, we did the site drive-in. You allowed folks to speak their mind right at the beginning of the meeting, and it went great after that. And it's up to you, however you want to do it.
I guess it's a question of how much time we allocate.
It's up
in
to you,
part.
Dad, on that too.
I think certainly with public comments, it's going to take some time, and but I guess I can only speak personally. I don't think that saying the 17th is going to be the only meeting.
Oh, no.
It can't be.
No, and
The
I think
first-
we've got to have a dialogue with them as to, okay, well, when are there going to be other meetings, and what is the format going to be? And
I suppose you could go in the idea on the 17th and have the dialogue with them and decide how it goes. If there's some extra time for some questions, open it up to a limited amount of public inquiry, It's up to you.
We've posed a lot of questions already that haven't been answered.
Understood.
And I think it's imperative that they answer some of these questions before we continue to do this, because they're going to have a whole song and pony whatever again, and we're still going to be left. Answer some of our questions so we
That's-
can move on.
and we've told them that it starts with answering the
If we could get that in advance
questions.
of the meeting,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful, because then we could we could put it out to the people and have a real conversation about specific things. They're gonna say the same thing they've already said, that we don't have any answers to. We're not going anywhere. So I would hope that the request from them would be that those questions are answered in writing prior to their presentation.
I'll make that request.
That would be nice. What's the board's, preference on the 17th? Do we want to allow for a limited period of time for public comment, questions?
I think there's a lot of people that have a vested interest, that have worked hard and researched this issue, have gone to a lot of their meetings, and I would like to give them the opportunity to ask questions, because I think some of their questions may very well be better than the ones we can ask because of their level of involvement, and maybe be insightful and perhaps even educational.
Okay.
What you're, I mean, I don't want to discourage, a discussion, but if you give the public the opportunity to ask the Vineyard Wind questions directly, there are going to be arguments. And the same question is going to get asked 20 times by 20 different people, and you will be no closer to getting an answer than you were with the first person. I would like to see some time limit on public comment. I don't know, maybe we could take all public comment in the beginning, and somebody could be responsible for keeping track of the questions, and if they are not questions that we have asked, they could be conveyed to the panel. But, I've sat through enough of these. You don't want
Just
a never-ending back and forth, because that's what it will be.
Well, perhaps maybe we'll get the answers in advance. If not, perhaps maybe we can let them have their thing and we can ask our questions. Then we can ask the public, so we're not.
We could certainly solicit public questions through the internet and then in advance, so you would have that advance of that night. Because there'll be some folks that follow the meeting on TV at home and pick up that information and pen out an email tomorrow or the next day to us.
Okay.
There have been a lot of questions raised already. A lot.
And to Mike's point, there have been some folks that have done a lot of homework.
Right.
They have great questions. They have great follow-up questions, which are often better than the questions. And they it should be heard.
Okay. I think we need to have a combination of both, from what I'm hearing, is, an opportunity for the board to have some questions and answers with Vineyard Wind. They probably need, 10 minutes to bring us up to speed and make sure everybody's on a common ground as to where they stand right now in their permitting process. And then get into a period of time for board questions. Now, whether we want to have that at the end or have it at the beginning, it would be nice to hear the responses to public comments as well, and I think in advance before we have the board discussion.
I'll ask them as part of that to start the meeting with set the clock where you're at today with the effort, and then give them an opportunity to answer all the questions that we've submitted to date. And then any other additional questions that come in from the public, put that in there, see how that goes, and then dialogue after that and see what you want to do with it.
Okay. And I think we've got to make it clear, probably in the introduction, that this isn't the only meeting. There will be future meetings, and we'll advise people of schedules. So, all right.
Last thing I got is Isaac Berry.
Let me just mention one
Sure.
other thing, 'cause Tracy brought up the question of funding. I did have a conversation with Senator Sear today about potentially getting some funding, and he's researching a couple of different options to try to find funding for us.
Why should the state pay for it? That's still taxpayer dollars. The
Right.
state
Well-
shouldn't be paying for it. The local taxpayer shouldn't be paying for it. The
Right.
developer should be paying for it.
I think we have that opportunity to ask them. Yeah,
I'm not interested in the state paying for it. It's just, those are our tax dollars too.
I'm just concerned that there's such a large volume of information coming at us that There's certain deadlines approaching for us too, that between legal counsel that we have as part of our retainage, our own internal staff, I mean, I don't want to be underwhelmed with a response opportunity at this very early stage, because everything that's coming at us, there's an opportunity virtually to be able to peer review or say back, you know, here's what we think. And we don't have the expertise to evaluate that information. And I don't care where the money comes from. I care about the assist and the advice that we can get quickly.
Well, I think on the 17th, we ask them for that funding, or we stop our conversation.
I don't think we can make that conditional. You know, I think certainly asking them for the funding and, or other ways that we can accomplish that.
So we're gonna have
would be
we're gonna
appropriate.
enter into an agreement with another partner who doesn't want to be our partner. I mean, this is the same thing. Well, what are we doing? Either they want to be our partner and work with us and help us, or they don't. It's pretty
Frustrating
simple.
part. I'm with you.
All right. Is there anything else, Dan?
Yeah, I just have that request of the Barry family for July 7th. I didn't know if anybody had volunteered yet.
I thought we nominated somebody last meeting.
Yeah, we did.
Then there was a second.
No.
Yeah.
I figure if you're going to talk about the American Revolution, what better person than someone who teaches government at the community college?
That's where we ended last meeting.
I thought it was Mike.
I mean,
I
really.
thought you had your speech from,
The Civil War.
yeah,
Ready.
yeah, yeah.
But that's copyrighted.
Does it start with 4 score?
If somebody wants to volunteer, just send me an email tomorrow. That'd be great.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
will do.
Okay. All right. So, anything else on DY or the Mattakey School project?
No, I think we're,
Well said at
we
this
covered
point.
all those grounds,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay. We're adjourned.